The most important thing to us is what do they want? And then we have to take that and then figure out what we need out of the situation and make both worlds make it make sense.
I think I'll probably go with one of the more or less complex first. And the first one, I know we're talking about a deal last night, the 100K deal with doing it 3 different ways, doing it cash, doing it with an OPM, and then I guess doing it with another way that we did it as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I know the question was, the example that you had gave was at the end with Bruce, you had gave him a 15% split or 15% back on his money. So when you're doing a deal, how do you decipher what percentage or how you decipher who gets what, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, Keith. So remember, I told y'all yesterday, right? The most important thing to us is what do they want? And then we have to take that and then figure out what we need out of the situation and make both worlds make it make sense. So, in that example, I was assuming that 15% would be a great return for Bruce, right? So that was the backstory that y'all did. I was assuming that Bruce would want a 15% return, as would most investors, because when you start to talk to your investors and you figuring out like what's important to them, you understanding the markets that they had their money in. So like, for instance, one of the guys I told y'all about the other day that's got the $20 million company, and I raised like close to $500,000 from him. He was the dolphin I was speaking of. He told me during that lunch that he had $1 million in the stock market. And I essentially knew what he was yielding in the stock market, but I also knew that he wanted to diversify from the stock market. So I knew when I packaged and delivered the deal that based on what he's yielding currently in his current investments, that I needed to meet or exceed that by way of my other investment. But I also gave myself a little latitude by knowing while he's making 10% in the market, he also wants to diversify because he sees that as risky. So even if I come at 8-10% with a potential of making an equity multiple of 3x on his investment over a 5-year period, that would still be enticing to him, because he's not looking at what he's giving up. He's looking at what he's gaining, because his plan was to diversify his risk from having over $1 million in the stock market. Does that make sense? So that's why it's so important that we on a fact-finding mission every time we deal with an investor to understand what's important to them. And then you sell them what they want and deliver what they need.
For sure. Appreciate that. And
yes,
then
sir.
real quick too, I know we were talking yesterday about vetting contractors. So when you're looking at doing something like that remotely, like I'm here in the Orlando market, same as you here in Orlando. So if I need something done in Orlando, I mean, growing up here, I'm pretty sure I can, and doing stuff on my own, I know I can find somebody pretty quickly. Now, when I'm doing something like that remotely, one of the first things when you find a deal, one of the first things I think about is, okay, well, who I'm going to find to do the work. So when you're looking at doing something like that remotely, where, maybe I could fly there and pop up on them, but it's not as likely as me driving to Kissimmee here in Orlando. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
how do you go about vetting contractors remotely when you're trying to invest remotely?
Sure. So, like if you're doing it locally, you still need to build allies, right? Because just because your brother may know a contractor don't mean that that's a good contractor for you. No different than, if you get in a Facebook group and somebody give you a recommendation, that person also may not be a good person for you. And I've literally had contractors that done a great job for me, but a horrible job for somebody else, right? Because it's 90% management. It's the people aspect. So if I give you the same contractor, but I know how to handle him because I understand the 4 personality types and all the rest of it, I know how to get the most out of him, I know how to best hold him accountable, you may have a horrible experience, right? Juxtapose what I did because you gave him too much latitude, you didn't keep him on a tight leash, and he ran wild on you, right? So what happens is The process by vetting the contractor, whether they local or not, is the same. The difference is that you may not physically be there to be the one to do the pop-up. So what'll happen is that means you'll need to identify your project manager in that market first, so that, or your ally, whoever that person is, could be a realtor, right? So for most of y'all, let me just tell y'all this, when y'all start going remotely, for most of you, your first ally is gonna be your agent. They got the most vested interest in your success initially because they trying to sell you the property. So as long as you know how to package and deliver that conversation, they'll be more inclined to do all this extra stuff and help and connect you and connect some of the dots for you, right? They have a vested interest because they're going to make money from your purchase. Now, beyond them, it's incumbent upon you to really get somebody that you can mold into your project manager in that market and have them be the one who the boots on the ground to hold the contractor accountable on a day-to-day. Whatever type of rhythm that you set up in your business, whether they go out 3 times a week, twice a week, whether y'all huddle as a team once a week, you'll set up that cadence in your business based on what appeases your schedule and your lifestyle.